It appeared as though Ruth Buzzi was just another sketch performer on the Laugh-In set in 1970. Not long after that, she uttered a word that would haunt her professional life. A threatening phone call changed the show's producers' fortunes, sponsors cut ties with her, and the FBI started watching her. At last, the dirt on television's most divisive moment is starting to trickle out, and it's even worse than everyone had anticipated. Comedic television shows were popular in 1967. Variety shows always ran at the same pace, and the endings of sketches and jokes were predictable, but George Schlatter and Ed Friendly had different plans. Making a show that felt as vibrant as the real world and captured its wacky energy was their main objective. They wanted to create Laugh-In, a comedy show that would defy all television norms. And they found inspiration in counterculture gatherings like Love-Ins and Be-Ins. The event was described by Schlatter as an assault on the senses. The show rushed right into the jokes without giving the audience a chance to breathe. As a matter of fact, it continued to swiftly deliver joke after joke. Every show had over 350 little segments that covered everything from slapstick to satire to offbeat humor. There was never a lull in action, and the tempo was steady. The comic would switch gears quickly, making a biting political joke 1 second and then having an animated character dance around in an absurd costume the next. A plethora of ideas were available. Vaudeville and burlesque were its sources of humor. The unpredictable nature of Ernie Kovacs's playing style made it difficult to predict. However, it was most influenced by British humor. It was previously demonstrated that it was feasible to discuss social and political issues on television by an astute program named That Was the Week That Was. Schlatter and Friendly ramped up that concept to supernova level. Thanks to a combination of insightful criticism and humorous antics, the show avoided coming across as preachy or predictable. Something was off about the structure. Laugh-In revolutionized the use of fast cuts and abrupt changes in British comedy. There was no beginning or end to anything in the sketches. Unexpectedly funny jokes were sprinkled throughout. There would be no time for audience members to respond before scenes changed. There was purpose behind this air of disorder. It was meant to reflect the way things feel in today's fast-paced world. For some viewers, it was just too much. Enough was enough for some. Acquiring airtime for the program was no picnic. When Schlatter and Friendly presented it to the network executives, they were confused. In my opinion, the structure posed too many dangers. The tempo seemed excessively rapid. At long last, NBC consented to air one bonus show on September 9, 1967. Being a test, they didn't think it would have much of an impact. However, the audience wasted no time reacting. The results showed promise. Everyone was talking about it. A complete season was ordered by NBC in a matter of months. It served as the basis for all subsequent episodes. Show host Dan Rowan and co-host Dick Martin were quick wits who kept the audience in stitches with their jokes. When celebrities like Barbara Feldon and Flip Wilson appeared as special guests, things became even more intriguing. The distinctive style of the program was initially demonstrated in recurring segments such as The Cocktail Party and Mod World. The joke wall, a distinctive feature, allowed comics to deliver one-liners through diminutive doors. In addition, there was News of the Future, which frequently made outrageous claims. The election of Ronald Reagan is one example of how some of them came to pass. Laugh-In was initially considered by NBC to be nothing more than a time filler that could challenge long-running series like Gunsmoke. It was the most watched program on television by the conclusion of its second season, though no one was unhappy with it. Anyone, from kids to adults, could enjoy watching it. Opinions were mixed on whether the light-hearted banter or the scathing critique was more appreciated. There was sure to be something on Laugh-In to make people laugh. What made Dan Rowan and Dick Martin's Laugh-In so fantastic was the fact that they didn't appear to go together. They began performing in bars, where they honed a comedic routine that highlighted individual quirks. Rowan played the role of the charismatic leader who was always talking a good game, while Martin was the role of the clueless dummy. They continued their on-screen chemistry on television. Laugh-In was unlike any other television show when it premiered on January 22, 1968. Full of one-liners and ridiculous skits, it was fast-paced and haphazard. Aside from that, by the 8th episode, the show had surpassed all others in terms of American viewers. Rowan and Martin kept things from going completely bonkers. Their back-and-forth conversation provided structure to the show, even though everything else was scattered. Stupidity would be Martin's word choice. Rowan would be amused. A lot of people would love it. Their now iconic show-ending exchange in which Rowan would say goodnight, Dick," and Martin would reply, "Good night, Dick," became TV gold. But they were more than that. Rowan portrayed the flamboyant General Bullwright, and Martin portrayed Leonard Swizzle, a perpetually inebriated partygoer. No time was allowed to prepare for the subsequent sketch because the show was moving at a breakneck pace. As soon as one joke was over, another one would be on its way. Wild energy like that had never been seen on television before, and it revolutionized comedy. Programs like SNL couldn't exist without Laugh-In. Even before they became famous, some of Laugh-In's biggest names were relative unknowns. There was Goldie Hawn among them. In 1968, she made her debut on the show. A lively blonde, she found humor in every situation. It was obvious that she wasn't acting. The producer, George Schlatter, advised her against practicing so that her answers would come across as genuine. Word of her infectious laughter spread like wildfire. She went on to become one of Hollywood's biggest stars after winning an Oscar for Cactus Flower 2 years later. When Lily Tomlin joined in 1969, she quickly became famous. She created whole personas in addition to her acting. One of her most compelling characters, Ernestine, was an obnoxious person who annoys anyone who answers the phone. Am I contacting the right party with this one ringy-dingy? Then there was 5-year-old Edith Ann, who would sit in a large rocking chair and deliver lengthy monologues that would inevitably conclude with the words, "And that's the truth." The ability to create memorable characters propelled Tomlin to stardom on the show. After that, her success continued to grow. One of Hollywood's most famous comics, she went on to star in films like 9 to 5 on the big screen. Henry Gibson did not operate in this manner. In contrast to the wild and crazy rest of the show, he kept things simple. A poem by Henry Gibson he would proclaim while raising a large flower in his right hand. After that, he'd read a brief, solemn poem that offered a clever commentary on the news or was completely offbeat. The wild energy of the show was in sharp contrast to his composed demeanor. Laugh-In wasn't the only platform he utilized to bring attention to environmental issues. Even before it became a mainstream movement, he documented it in poetry and prose. Joanne Worley could not be evaded. She drew admirers with her raucous personality, eccentric style, and outrageous clothing. Her jokes were delivered with an air of theatricality. To make her jokes more funny, she would frequently sing in an operatic style or add a dramatic pause. As a stand-up comic, she became famous for her jokes about chickens. Because of how peculiar they were, she came to identify with them. Ruth Buzzi and Arte Johnson were responsible for some of the show's most iconic moments. Wagner, a German soldier, was one of the guests on Johnson's show. Very interesting, but stupid, he'd utter as he sprang from within a bush. It quickly rose to prominence as one of the show's most memorable lines. Among his figures, Tyrone F. is another name. The eerie old man known as Hornay wasted no time in each episode attempting to woo Ruth Buzzi's Gladys Ormsby. The role was perfectly suited to her. Gladys had her purse at the ready whenever Tyrone got too near. Angry and undressed, she was a real downer. Whenever she struck him, the spectators couldn't help but burst into laughter. Even though they were routine, the little things never got old. The role Buzzi played on the show propelled her to stardom, earning her 5 Emmy and a Golden Globe nominations. One of the things that set Laugh-In apart was its guest stars. There was no telling who would turn up. Once, John Wayne made an appearance while dressed as a bunny. The drawings got Sammy Davis Jr.'s special brand of cool. Famous for his deep, powerful voice, Orson Welles got in on the action. Strangest of all, Richard Nixon showed up. In 1968, Richard Nixon pulled a stunt no one had anticipated. He attempted comedy on national television. While staring into the camera, the Republican presidential candidate awkwardly asked, "Sock it to me?" For a total of 6 seconds, his speech was labored and unnatural. His speech was muddled. It was successful, though. The crowd burst out laughing. That seemingly insignificant detail may have been the deciding factor in one of the closest races in American history. That year, the nation faced numerous challenges. Overly lengthy was the duration of the Vietnam War. Protests could be seen in every corner. The assassinations of Robert F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr., the United States seemed to be fragmenting. Nixon was considering a return to politics following his defeats in the 1960 presidential race and the 1962 California gubernatorial race. The fact that people perceived him as solemn, distant, and unfeeling was his greatest flaw. Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In was the following show. Because it was fast-paced, boisterous, and unexpected, it topped the U.S. television ratings. The youthful audience thoroughly enjoyed the humorous skits and memorable lines that were included. The show poked fun at everything, including politics. The idea of Nixon appearing on Laugh-In was considered foolish by some of his advisors. The hope was that it would endear him to more people. It was accomplished with great effort by Paul Keyes, a Republican writer for the show who supported Nixon. He asserted that a touch of humor could swiftly alter public sentiment toward Nixon. Nixon arrived at NBC's Burbank studios on September 12 to film his scene. However, an issue existed. Production crews were hoping Nixon would make a cheesy remark like, "You bet your sweet bippy." Nixon was uninterested. Not understanding the phrase made him feel foolish, and he didn't want that.